Your resilience increases with your resources. Increasing your resources increases your resilience. You increase your resources by increasing your people and your support.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in global burnout expert Cait Donovan, who is on a mission to end burnout culture so that we can create environments for sustainable success. But at the heart of this work, Cait makes it clear that we must invest time in better understanding ourselves so as to form interoceptive practices that ready us for the challenges that come with growth. And welcome back into the most recent installment of Growth Ready. I'm so excited to be welcoming someone today who I've had the privilege to get to know through this beautiful community that is the National Speakers Association. But before we go into how we know each other and all our backgrounds, etc., before we get started, Cait, I would love for you, Cait Donovan, let me give you your whole name. Cait, I would love for you to tell everybody what it means to you to be growth ready.
In my world, the thing that I'm always looking for is something called bounce back ability. And bounce back ability is resilience, but bigger than. Mm-hmm. And to me, bounce back ability includes resilience, it includes self-trust, it includes surrender, it includes grit, and it includes agility. And all of those things together are growth ready to me. If you are centered enough in your space that when you get pulled to the side, you can come back through center, you're growth ready. If something changes and you still feel like you have enough space to be balanced, you're growth ready.
I love the idea that we can have this central point, as you allude to, that can be almost our inner recognition, if you will, that, hey, no matter where I've gone, no matter where my mind may have wandered, no matter how much I've been pulled in some direction, emotionally, spiritually, whatever's going on in my day, that we can develop this ability to center ourselves. And I preface it with that because I know this is not something we wake up or we are born with. This takes a lot of work. But I want to immediately, I want to immediately start there. So I'm just going to sort of set the table right there is when you talk about this centering, is it a practice? It is a way of being? Like, I would love to hear that in your words.
From a psychological perspective, it's about having what's known as an internal locus of control, right? It's about understanding that you influence the outcome of your life, that maybe you don't control every single dang thing, but you have enough influence over your life that when something is interesting, you're allowed to turn to the right. And if something pulls you off to the right and you'd rather be back to center, you can make that decision for yourself. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, it's about understanding that you have influence over your own life. For some people, having an external locus of control can be acceptable if that external locus of control is deemed to be a positive influence. So if you think that like the world is out to get you and everything always happens to you and you're in this sort of victim mindset, that's an external locus of control. But so is, I put my faith in God and the universe. And I trust that the things that happen to me, right? So that can be an external locus of control that's useful and can allow you to stay centered.
It's so important that people hear the way you just presented that. It doesn't the circumstances, the positive, the negative, all that kind of thing. It all falls into the same bucket in that regard.
Yes.
You know, and I think just in that itself. I'm curious, like for me, I immediately, the way that resonated with me was like, okay, that means I truly do have control. Like there is something I can control here that otherwise, if I just kept assuming it's either one or the other, or it's, you know, whatever it may be, that there's this, I mean, am I wrong in hearing like there's maybe just a spectrum? There's a spectrum of what it is you're referring to.
There's a spectrum of what it is I'm referring to, and most of that falls back into my training is in Chinese medicine. So I'm an acupuncturist with a master's degree in Chinese medicine by education. And the core idea of Chinese medicine is based on the Tai Chi symbol, that black and yellow that most people call it the yin yang symbol, right? It's called the Tai Chi symbol. And that symbol is basically the acceptance of paradox and change and dynamism, and the fact that when sadness gets massive, there's a seed of happiness in the center of it. And when happiness gets massive, there's a seed of something else inside of it, right? Like that there's always, in every situation, even when things feel massively out of control, there's always something that you have control over. There's always a seed of control you can come back to. That might only be whether or not you're maintaining your sleep hygiene. That might be the only thing that you can focus on for a week at a time because life has gone mental and that's all you've got. That's okay. Then that's where that's where our focus is.
It's so, I think one thing that our audience is all too familiar with through the show is hearing insights from folks when it comes to how we make things great, how we be the best, how we become awesome. And I am always challenging our guests to come on here and say, but it can't always be that way, and when it's not, what does finding the slither of positivity, of great, of awesome, what does that look like? And you just immediately, I love how you explain that in the sense of, whatever's going on within our world, there has to be something we can sort of assess and say, but hey, no matter all of this chaos, no matter all of these things that are wrong, can I go to bed on time? Can I control what I put in my body? Like all this kind of stuff, right? There's ways to sort of, going back to that external focus. It's like, can we just have one eye on something during the difficulty times?
And there's a very clear neuroscience-based reason to do this. There's a function of our brain and a function of our functioning called interoception, which means internal feeling, basically, which tells us it is all of the things that we feel internally in our bodies and respond to in our bodies. So this is everything from when you feel an emotion, physically and or mentally. It's when you feel a temperature change. It's when you feel that you have to go to the bathroom. It's when you feel like you're tired. It's when you feel like your eyes are getting blurry or whatever it is. Any sort of internal sensation that you have is interoception, and your ability to respond to it relates to your ability to respond to life at large. The more you work on interoception on purpose, the more you pay attention to the basic core needs of your human body figure, the better emotional regulation you have, and the higher level you are you're able to notice at a higher level when things are off in your surroundings. Because if you pay really close attention to your hunger signals for, say, a month and just really get familiar with them, you'll know that you're going to be hungry in 45 minutes. Right. And sometimes most of us are so busy that we have no idea what's going on in our bodies until we're like, oh, my God, I didn't have lunch. I'm dying.
Right.
Right. But if you pay attention to that for an extended period of time, what you'll find is that level of attention and attunement allows you to also see and react to things in your environment, which gives you an even bigger sense of control. People that are like real good at sensing like the patterns and the things that are coming, they have very high levels of interoception.
Yes. And in my world of coaching, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we touch on this as like the third eye almost within the coaching relationship. And for me, it is something I'm always aspiring to, intuitively as a coach, is how can I be so dialed in with my level of presence to be able to acknowledge the person across from me, give them my entire presence, and at the same time be aware of really what's happening in the room and what's happening in the dynamic of the conversation. And honestly, when you first start this stuff, Cait, I'll be honest, it's exhausting. It's hard. It's really hard. So I immediately, I just want to kind of put that right back at you and to say, anyone listening to this right now, how do we just immediately say, okay, where on earth do we start? Where on earth do we start up just practicing better introspection?
This, to me, we call this foundational self-care in my business. And we literally start with the unofficial hashtag of my podcast is pee when you need to pee. Right? It's like, don't write 2 more emails.
The unofficial hashtag.
Unofficial hashtag. One of my podcast listeners quilted it into a blanket for me.
Oh my God.
I have a blanket that says hashtag pee when you need to pee on it, which is amazing, right? So, but the idea is that we attend to our foundational core needs. So the thing that you're talking about, this idea that you can sort of, and correct me if I misinterpret, that you can sort of be a vessel and be present and sort of allow what's coming through to come through within a coaching session and really sort of be centered. One of the things with that idea and with the idea of healing in acupuncture and in a lot of esoteric practices and complementary practices is that you're supposed to sort of be empty. There's this commonality that like you're supposed to empty yourself so that you can be present for what is. However, it's much easier to empty yourself when you have already taken care of your core foundational needs. It's much easier to empty yourself when you are fed and you have slept well and you have moved your body and you have gone to the bathroom and you have, right? Like when your body is taken care of, that level of presence is much easier. So the first steps are foundational self-care. Choose one of them, practice for a month, move on to the next. And they are as silly as pee when you need to pee, eat when you're hungry, drink when you're thirsty. Don't write 4 more emails. Don't interrupt a phone call. Say, hey, I'll be right back. I'm going to run to the bathroom. Like, we don't do that. We just sit there dying. And then we wonder why we don't notice that burnout crept up. We wonder why we didn't notice that something in our body was going wrong. Like, I knew my shoulder was a little achy, but now I can't move it at all and I have frozen shoulder. Like, we wonder, well, this is why. Because we override our own signals constantly.
And we've gotten to 11 minutes and 13 seconds in our conversation. And what I love about it is that this is when I get to almost provide the aha moment for anyone listening, even though I would have touched on it in the introduction very quickly. But you are a burnout expert. You are a burnout expert. And here you are really starting to create a formula without us even talking about it and referencing the fact that this is what you do. That people can just be like, oh yeah. Now this does remind me of a year ago when I felt things getting a little bit off the ropes, and now when today I feel completely burned out, completely fed up with things, completely detached from certain areas of my life that I used to be really connected to, etc. And why I was so excited about having you on was that we have a bunch of high performers that listen to this show. And I happen to personally believe that it is those folks are the ones most vulnerable to burnout, mainly because they're so adamant that they're not prone to burnout, that they're above it somehow. So it's like, I'm a high performer. I don't burn out. I just go, you know, and I've been a high performer for about 25 years. And I can tell you, high performers burn out. And when they do, typically, it's a lot uglier because they've pushed it to the absolute brink. And most times past too.
And this is, I think, the question becomes, what is true high performance?
Gosh, right. I love that question. What a great question.
What does it mean? What is true high? Because if you are in burnout recovery, we often have to redefine people's idea of what success means, right? And this would be a similar thing. Like, what does it actually mean to you to be a high performer? If you are really successful financially and you're able to be highly productive for 20 years, but then you die of a heart attack, does it still count? Maybe, I don't know the answers, but like, what does it mean to you truly to be a high performer? If you are uber successful, but you haven't seen your family in a month, is that truly high performance to you? Maybe it is. Maybe that's your bag. Cool. But do we know what that really means? I think we throw around the word high performance, and what we typically mean is high productivity.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The highest performing athletes are not productive all the time. They're resting like a lot.
I can attest to that.
Right?
I can attest to that. Yeah. It's what it does is it immediately encourages me to take us to this notion of the environment within which we operate. And I know so much of what you're trying to achieve in the work that you're doing is around this culture of, let's call it sustainability. Like how do we sustain success, and how do we do it in a way where we can be the greatest version of ourselves at the same time? And again, I don't want to describe it for you because I know you can describe it 10 times better than I can, and more accurately, most importantly. But the part of this that I really want to step into with you now is, what are these conditions that we need to be focused on when it comes to either being aware that we may be getting burned out, avoid burnout? Like, I'd love to start with the conditions first before we maybe start to go into some of the symptoms and then some of the ways to sort of come away from it as well.
So I do not believe in, and this will bother some people, I don't really believe in burnout prevention. Because of this skill, this interoceptive skill, most of us that burn out, what I've found is that most of us have a very low level of interoception. We're not aware of what our body is doing. We don't then know, we can't expand that to then really truly understand what we want, what we need, what we prefer, what we desire. Most people that I talk to when they're burnt out, like, you could ask them what they want to eat. They literally have no idea. They have given over that choice and that power to other people for so long that they have no clue. So they are not going to be able to notice the signs along the way. So they won't be able to stop and prevent themselves from burning out because they won't notice the things as they happen. This is much more common than people realize. So I don't really believe that on an individual level. If you are somebody who has consistently avoided burnout, you are somebody that has a high level of interoception, you probably weren't going to burn out anyway. Like, you were never going to let it get there.
Yeah.
So my focus in my work is really, truly on burnout recovery. Because I think so many people talk about burnout prevention, and I think it's a waste of our time. If we're going to talk about true burnout prevention, like really changing burnout culture for good, which is another higher level mission goal of mine, then we have to talk about childhood trauma and treating children better and making sure children are fed and ready for school and have their emotional needs met a minimum of 51% of the time in order to form a secure attachment, according to studies, which is wild. It's only 51%, and still some of us are missing it. So if we're really going to change it, then we have to change it from 40 years ago in my life, not from today.
Yeah.
Right. But noticing it, if we are going to notice it, if it is going to come into our awareness, most commonly, if you're a high performer, what you're going to notice is you are not as high performing. You can't keep up with your own schedule. That was always totally manageable for you. Most likely, if you're in this high performance world, you are some sort of athlete. You do some sort of regular exercise, and that exercise gives you energy for the most part. I'm a rower. I row 3 times a week in the morning, and after I row, I'm typically like pumped for the day.
Yeah.
When I was burnt out, if I tried to run or ski or row or whatever the thing I was doing at the time, I would need to come home and nap. So that same activity doesn't give me the same result. The next thing, and the thing that I find most commonly in the high-performing crew, is I'm being an absolute beast to everyone around me. I know that I'm being ridiculous, and I cannot control myself. Like, I see it happening. I feel it happening. The words are coming out, and I don't want to even say them, but I can't seem to stop it. This is the thing that usually sets high performers over the edge and gets them to call me. when they're like, I'm going to lose my family because I'm such a jerk right now and I have no idea why. I'm not trying to be, I just can't help it. So those would be the things that I would be paying attention to really closely. One day here and there, no problem. Everybody's got a day here and there. But if it keeps happening, careful.
Definitely. It's it immediately just makes me think in terms of the coming back to the question of the conditions. It's us. Like, we're the conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's environmental conditions.
But in terms of specifically to what you were just alluding to, like I we could definitely go into environment, but to your point, to really sort of hammer home your point of this, not about prevention.
No.
It's about the recovery.
Yeah.
If that is to be true, then from a solution, from a condition standpoint, really the conditions start with what are we attending to right here.
Yes.
That's for anyone listening, I find that to be quite empowering in a way.
If you have an internal locus of control, yes.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't,
then you're a victim of the situation.
I would love to talk to just some of those initial steps that you take in when it comes to if someone just hurt themselves, because that's possible. We're talking right now, and someone's just like, "Good God, Cait just described me." Like, this is not good. Or someone close to me, right? Someone close to me. I would love for you to walk us through what some of those initial steps may look like when we do have that kind of awareness.
Foundational self-care is number one. So tapping into working on growing the part of your brain that's responsible for interoception really pointedly. We already talked about that, and those are the basic things. Foundational self-care is always the beginning. And most people that burn out, because they are high achievers and high performers, they are really annoyed at that advice. Because they want to make some big change and do some drastic thing and really get to it. And I'm like, well, just go to the bathroom when your bladder feels full. And they're like, what? Really? And I'm like, yes, do that. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. That will start to improve your emotional regulation automatically without you actually talking to a therapist or doing anything with your emotions. The next thing we do is tap into the quote-unquote negative emotions. Now, in Chinese medicine, there's no such thing as a negative emotion. All emotions are equal. They are useful if we use them. The emotions that become toxic and create issues in the body are the ones that are unprocessed, untransformed, ignored, thrown away, pushed to the side, smushed into a box in the attic, and hid real far back. If we use an emotion when it comes up, if we recognize it, pay attention to it, interoception, I'm noticing that I'm angry, so now I have to sit down and is there something I can do here? If there is, I have to take an action. If there's not, I have to go do some breathing exercises, right? We start looking at the negative emotions that people are typically bad at managing, and we start working through them. My favorite one for the burnt out crowd is resentment. It's the best one for two reasons. One, it will tell you every single place in your life where your boundaries are being crossed. Most of the time, it's you crossing your own boundary. Don't tell anybody.
Right.
Right. But it'll tell you every single place in your life that your boundaries are being crossed. The second thing that it will start teaching you is what your self-care needs are, because it will show you every single place in your life where you have chosen self-neglect or self-abandonment in favor of completing a project, managing someone else's needs and emotions, etc. So boundaries and self-sacrifice. If we can use that to teach you, hey, these are the ways that your body and your life is really craving self-care. And these are the places where you're expending energy that you really don't actually want to expend. You think it's a nice thing to do. You think you're good at it, but you hate it. Like you're not happy with it, and you're lying to yourself about it. If we can fix those two things, you gain an immense amount of energy back. So these are the two things that we start with: foundational self-care and resentment.
Yeah. And to know that you can explore something like resentment and say in that moment, say, okay, it's so interesting to sort of say, like, by I can identify my self-care by looking at where it is I actually neglect myself.
So I'll give you an example. We do a lot of hiking and things like that, my husband and I. And so we were getting ready for a hike a little while ago, and fully dressed, hiking boots on, jacket zipped, the dog is in a harness, ready to put the leash on. We are like ready to leave the house. Yeah. And it occurs to me that I have to go to the bathroom, which is like so annoying. Mm-hmm. I grew up not wanting to ever bother anybody. So now I'm nervous that I'm going to bother my husband by asking him to wait 60 seconds while I go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. My husband has never complained about that ever. So this has nothing to do with him. This is all my crap.
Yep.
Right? Before I burnt out, I would have not gone to the bathroom. Then I would have gone on the hike. My husband would have at some point taken a wrong turn, because that's what happens. And then we would have gone an extra 2 miles. And this entire time, I really have to go to the bathroom. So now I'm not drinking water because I already have to go to the bathroom. Then we get back in the car and he decides to stop for French fries on the way home. Now I'm losing my mind. And I'm feeling so resentful, and I'm feeling like he's not paying attention to me. Meanwhile, I haven't said anything. I'm resentful because I did not take care of this basic need before we went on this whole trip. I'm resentful because I didn't think I was valuable enough to ask my husband for 60 seconds of his time.
That little bit at the end is the whole story.
Yes.
That's the whole story.
Yes.
Do we put enough value on our time, on ourselves?
And the most basic of our needs.
Yeah. I mean, you're telling this story, and I'm like, I can think of 3 times this week where I needed the bathroom and I didn't go. And I'm like, again, I'm signed up for the hashtag. I'm coming. But the thing for me is like that point there at the end is it's literally your way of saying like, it's not important. It's not important for me to do this. Yeah. I'm not important enough for this to be a priority right now.
Right.
This coaching session, for instance, cannot start 90 seconds late because Steve has to just excuse himself and pee. Yeah. The person wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
Again, to your point, it's a story, and it's a story that can, perfect example with that is that I need the bathroom the whole time. Good luck being present, Steve. Good luck being completely present for your client when all you can think about is, why didn't I just go pee? And then now you're probably going to interrupt the session 20 minutes in to be like, you know what? This is no joke anymore. I need to go pee.
I literally can't listen to a word you're saying because I'm just thinking about my
That's
bladder.
all I'm thinking about. Right.
Mm-hmm. And peeing is just one. It's like a silly thing.
It's such an example. It's such a tiny example. Yeah.
But it's all the things. Like I noticed another time I decided to do the dishes, and my husband was laying on the couch. Mm-hmm. My husband does the dishes all the time. We are a pretty even household, but I was furious that day. And when I thought about it, and I was starting to feel resentful, here I am doing the dishes, and he's laying on the couch and watching TV. And so I said to myself, okay, this is what you teach. Like, what's actually going on here? Mm-hmm. I wasn't mad that he wasn't doing the dishes. Not really. I was upset that he was able to allow himself to rest when he needed it, instead of forcing himself to do another chore before he allowed the rest, which highlighted a need of mine. You are not in a place to be doing the dishes right now. Go lay down. They're still going to be here after you rest. You don't have to earn the rest by finishing the dishes. He doesn't have to earn the rest by finishing the dishes, neither do you. These are stupid things that we do all day, every day. Women
All
and
day.
men.
Yeah. And it is that interoception again. It's just like, can I stop for a moment and just check in for all of, you can probably process it in about 10 seconds. Like, why am I doing this? What's really happening here?
But most people get stuck on I'm mad at my partner for not doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Instead of going the one level deeper and saying, but what is the need you have in this situation that's not being met? It might not be that you need rest in your story. It might be that you feel undervalued. And you're not getting recognition for the task that you're doing, and that's a problem. But that's then a conversation that you have to have, either with your partner or in couples therapy, but you have to talk about it at some point because it's an issue.
Yeah.
There's a need of yours that is not being met, but it's not the dishes.
And it's such a small step to professional life too. Just to be clear, like that. This is why I love what we're talking about, because the two of the personal, the professional, however you want to illustrate it, the two go hand in hand. I can think again, I loved your example before of like, why are you sending 4 more emails when all you want to do is go grab a drink or whatever it might be, or you're hungry. Lunch started 10 minutes ago and you told yourself, I just need to finish this email. You're now on the 4th. Yeah. We all do it. And anybody listen to this again, it's like, well, this is what I do. I just push through. I just make it work. And again, it goes back to, well, to your point earlier, what are we defining as success? What are we defining as growth? What are we defining as high performance? Because if it's about the way in which we show up on behalf of ourselves as our best self, we're probably falling short. We're probably falling short when we start to look at ourselves that way. And I do want to use where we're at right now as a way to transition, because I think it's a natural one, towards this other area that you spend so much time in that of resilience, because this is where it gets really interesting, and where I'm excited just to kind of dive into how you define it, how you assess it, etc. Because resilience is one of those words, right? It's, you hear it and you just go, I just push through. I'm just tough. I'm just this. I'm just that.
Until you snap.
Exactly. And so I would love for us now just to move to resilience and have you firstly just help frame that word for us from your perspective and the work that you do to begin with.
So I'll go back to the same thing I said at the very beginning. To me, we need to blow up the idea of resilience, like expand the idea of resilience to include what I call bounce back ability. Like when we're talking about resilience in an elastic, we pull the elastic and then it's supposed to go back to its regular shape. We all know that if we pull the elastic too far, it doesn't retain its original shape. And then if we pull it too far again, it doesn't retain its natural shape. And then we pull it too far again and it snaps. It has lost its resilience because it's been pulled too far away from center too many times. So to me, resilience is knowing your center well enough to know how far you can pull and still remain bounce backable. Now, the other part of resilience that I think is critical, that people don't talk about enough, is that there is only, there's a book on resilience in the Harvard Business Review, 6 emotional something or others series of books.
Right.
I can't remember what it's titled. I can look at it. I can pull it down if we need it. But
That's all good.
One of the books is on resilience, and it's just a series of HBR articles written on the topic. And I read one of the things one day, and it stopped me in my tracks. And it basically said this. What it boiled down to, underneath all the stuff, was there's only one true way to increase your resilience. Ask for help. You only have access to the resources that you have access to. The amount of resources you have access to changes how far you can stretch and then bounce back. So the more resources you have, the more bounce back ability you have. When you ask someone for help, you increase your resources by whatever amount of resources they have. And then you ask someone else for help and you increase your resources by whatever amount of resources they have. You have now tripled your resources with 2 simple questions. You cannot do that alone. You can't triple your resilience by yourself. Can you expand your VO2 max and can you, to a degree, sure.
Yeah.
But you're never going to move a scull or like a crew boat as fast as 4 people can row it as a single. That's never going to happen.
Right.
Your resilience increases with your resources. Increasing your resources increases your resilience. You increase your resources by increasing your people and your support. So I think we talk about resilience too much as an individual state. Resilience was never meant to be an individual state. We created resilience in tribes. Yeah. You're good at this. You're good at this. You have the resources to that. You have access to this. There's a stress response that is more prevalent in women. Everybody knows, fight or flight, freeze, fawn, these like typical, the Fs.
Yeah.
People do not talk about an entire concept of the stress response that is called tend and befriend. This was discovered, I think it was 2003, by a researcher called Dr. Shelley Taylor. And she said that when women are in very stressful situations, they do these two things very naturally. So say you are being attacked, you're in a tribe and you're being attacked by a neighboring village and you are hiding in the woods with your child and your child feels your stress and is about to cry. So what you do is you tend to your child's emotional needs so that they stay quiet so that you can stay hidden. What you do is when the sort of biggest drama is over, is you reach out to the fellow women in your community and you say, do you have access to berries today? Do you have access to meat today? Do you have access to, and you increase your resources. You befriend in order to increase your resilience. You can survive because of these skills.
It's the part of this that immediately jumps to mind, the word resilience came out in abundance during COVID. And everyone was like, we've been found out we are not a resilient culture. That's what we are failing on the resilience test here. But then when you run it through everything that you just ran it through, it's a really simple answer. We're all on our own.
Yes.
We're all on our own. We're being assessed at a skill that is not supposed to be an individual skill.
Agreed.
And like that is, to me, again, stay in this lane of growth and high performance. It's too often, if I'm trying to get to the mountaintop for whatever reason, if I get there, me, myself, and I, it's somehow, I don't know, is it supposed to be more impressive that you did it on your own?
We think so.
Yeah, we do. And again, the part where this is really sort of hitting me now centrally, like, I tried to do that in my previous career. I got fed up all the time with my circumstances, with my situations, and I'm able to look back now with this complete perspective of like, because you were trying to do it so much on your own, you were left with less energy, just less open-mindedness, less curiosity, all these kind of things. And the best part, this is the irony, when I started my business, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know I need help. And every time I've gone a little step further, I've had to keep reminding myself, dude, don't forget how you got here. Now that you're here is not the time for you to say, well, I figured it out now. I'm good. Now's the time to double down on those resources, double down on those connections, not to sort of ask without giving, just to say like, no, this is it. This is the work. This is what the work should look like.
Yeah. I mean, how many things, even cooking and recipes, simple things like home things, work things, how many things have been improved because one person said, oh, you know what I thought of? This little tiny addition. And it changes the whole GD thing. Mm-hmm. In such a profound way. And I had such a hard time with that. I had a really strong attachment to the belief that I have to do everything by myself. And this is childhood trauma, and this is being made to take care of myself too early, too young, too fast. Right? I know where it comes from. I get it. But it wasn't until I got into the speaking business that it started to shift for me. Because I ran acupuncture practices for 15 years around the world, Warsaw, Prague, and New York City. And I did so very successfully, except for I burnt myself out. Successfully, financially.
Right.
But my health was destroyed. That's not success. And when I one of the things that I realized was that the first practice that I built was incredibly busy. I was in Warsaw. I had a 6-month waiting list. It was wild. And I didn't understand at the time that if I had hired a receptionist, I would have made more money. The only thing I could think about was what this receptionist was going to cost me.
Right.
I could not figure out how she could expand my energy to be able to see more people because I didn't have to deal with all that stuff. It just did not fit into my world. Not doing that anymore. We know each other through the National Speakers Association. I ask people for things almost every day.
Yeah. That's why we started today before we press record. Me acknowledging, like, hey, I asked you to introduce me to someone or get me back in front of them, and boom, that was it. Problem solved.
Exactly. Right? Like, it makes everything so much better. And now I work with someone who, we went through a similar schooling. She's also an acupuncturist. I met her in acupuncture school, 20-something years ago. And she's now my director of coaching at my business. And I created a beginning of an online course that she now runs. She has made it like 5,000 times better than I ever would have. She wouldn't have been able to do it without the foundation. I wouldn't have been able to grow it without her.
It's beautiful. That's it. And there's another word that you said at the beginning, which again, I was loving the order that you provided me at the beginning. You just made this so procedural, so systematic for us here today. I appreciate it so much. But this notion of surrender, because I feel like that's where we're at now in the conversation as you're talking through this and you're showing me that example. Like that example right now is a person that has truly said, I surrender. I surrender to what is required for this thing to become what it's capable of becoming. And
Ooh, that felt good when you said that.
but that's what it's the clarity and the conviction. For me, that's when you know surrender is present. Is when someone's so clear and so convicted, like this is now where it is because everything that needed to be in place is in place.
Yeah, and I was able to get out of the way. Which I'm not traditionally good at, folks.
And well, I don't think, and this is where I get really curious about this word surrender, is I joke all the time when people say, what do you do? I say, I'm an executive coach. They say, what's that? And I go, well, I help people get out of their own way. Yeah. I need help with that. Yeah, of course you do. Like most of us do. And so talk to me a little bit about, I guess, and again, I don't want to use a term like final step if it's not the final step, but it's a step. It's the next step for me is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So for me, there's no such thing as a final step.
Yes.
At all, ever.
I felt that the moment it started coming out of my mouth, I was like, nope, pull it back.
There's no final step because there's no when you read a paragraph in Chinese, in the Chinese language, you have to read the whole paragraph to know what the words are about because the character can represent multiple words and multiple meanings depending on the context of the rest of the words. So if you tried to take a Chinese paragraph and go word for word, you would translate it incorrectly. So you have to have the whole context of the whole thing. So a lot of Chinese thought and Chinese philosophy functions in circles and in contexts instead of in lines. So having a finality is very Western. It's this idea like A plus B plus C equals success. Yay! Woohoo! Right?
But that has to be the cause of the approach that we've taken that leads to burnout. Right? Exactly. We're trying to get to a finish line.
Yes, and there's no finish line.
There's no finish line.
There's no finish line. So there's no finality. When you surrender, you then have to go back into where's your resilience? What do you need to attack next? What's the thing that you could get help with now? You just have to go back to the beginning of the circle and start all over. Mm-hmm. But the surrender piece is something that I still struggle with, if I'm totally honest. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. Mm-mm. It's not easy. Surrender to me comes hand in hand with trust. And then we go back to this idea of the locus of control. That you either have to have enough self-confidence and trust that you know that you'll take the next right step when it's the next right time. Or your external locus of control in God or the universe. You have to trust enough, yourself and it, to say, when the next signal comes, I will pay attention and respond appropriately.
How do we know? How do we know when we're doing that part well?
When it's internal, we know because it feels like wholeness. If it feels like when, Martha Beck describes integrity as us being fully whole, all of our pieces are integrated. So to me, we know this when we feel whole when we're taking the next step. We don't feel disjointed. We feel like all of me says yes to this thing. When we're looking at it from a spiritual perspective, from an external perspective, which neither of these are better than the other. There's just two different ways to do it. And a lot of people use both. I do. I use both. But if we're looking at this from a spiritual perspective, then you have to have spoken with whatever is your higher power enough to know what your signals are, or what it feels like physically to be pulled in a certain direction when it's time. That you were looking for something, say, you're doing something with the podcast and you're ready to shift something, but you don't know who's going to help you, and you don't know. And then one of your friends posts on LinkedIn about this person that helped them do this thing, and you're like, that's not even what I thought it was, but that's the thing that I need. And then trusting that and taking the step. To me, that's like surrender is the let go of what's happening right now and let it work. And trust that the next message is coming. But then you have to act when the trust shows up.
Right. But it comes back to what I love about this. It just reinforces where we started with the interoception. It's just like that yes. continued practice.
Yes.
And again, it's just this heightening of an internal trust as you speak through this, like that heightening of this trust that we have for ourselves. And then because of that internal trust, we can see the step, we can see the potential action, and we say, well, listen, if you claim you trust yourself the way you do, and this is the step that you've claimed that you've been looking to take,
then take it.
Go take it.
Yeah.
Go take it.
And when you have that level of trust and surrender and you practice that enough, you don't have to know the next 5 steps.
Right.
You just have to know the next 1 or maybe 2.
Gosh, so many people needed to hear that right now. I have I'm going to literally just take out this 15 seconds and send it to about 7 of my clients after we're done. It's just like, stop worrying about step 7.
You're not even, and you could describe step 7. You can go out to step 7 if you want, but you're going to be wrong because things are going to change along the way.
That's right. That's right. This is so good. You will be coming back in about maybe 7,500 episodes, something like that. When everyone's
can't wait.
Yeah, when everyone's already at that point and just like, okay, I've got another level. Can you bring the burnout lady back again, please? But here's what I really want to get to here, Cait, is that there's one final question that I have for you, because you mentioned it, and I do want to give some people some insight around this, is when we define success. Yeah. What does success? I'm just going to ask it completely based on your own sort of subjective opinion on this. Like, to you, Cait, what does it mean for us to aspire to be successful?
I don't think that I can answer the question for us to aspire to be successful.
Okay.
Because I really, truly believe that defining success happens on an individual scale. As much as resilience has to happen on a community scale, defining what feels like success to you is absolutely individual. For me personally, I feel successful when I am receiving enough from my work that I feel as fully generous as I enjoy being. Which means my work is not bringing up resentment. So we're back to the resentment, but from the other side of resentment is being full enough to feel fully generous. I want to serve the world. But when I'm not getting paid enough, when I don't have enough gigs coming in, when I'm not, it's harder to engender that generosity. And people like to be on this morally superior idea of like, I'm a giver. You know what? When I'm not getting mine, I will fully admit that I do not feel that same level of...
Yeah.
So for me, when I feel fully generous a majority of the time, I'm successful. That's part of it. When I can go to dinner with a girlfriend the same week that she asks me, that is success, because that means I have some control over my time. And when my body has the space that it needs to maintain its health in the context of my entire life, then I am successful.
thank you firstly for framing that question in a way that our listeners needed to frame it. Because I think 99 times out of 100, I would ask that kind of question and someone would try to come up with something that could be used by others. So I think that's really powerful that you're willing to sort of stand your ground on that and actually just say, you know what, I can only answer that from my own individual perspective, and this is what success means to me and how I assess it. Because I've done a ton of work on that myself, especially when we both operate in industries where it's so easy to fall into the trap of associating success through the eyes of others. It's so easy to do it, and
for all of us.
It is easy for all of us. You're right.
Yeah.
But I think the trick is, can you get so articulate and clear as you just did for our listeners around what success means to you, and then how disciplined can you remain to actually staying true to that, like really focusing on that,
and understand that it's going to develop and grow and shift as you develop and grow and shift. So my husband and I, we don't have children. So there's no part of me that defines the health and happiness of my children as part of my success. But I would imagine that most parents would have that built into their definition somewhere. Can you be successful if what you're doing is destroying your relationship with your children? I don't know. I don't have them. But my dog has a very good life. And it's important to me that I have enough time to walk her.
Right?
She wants to go out for an hour in the afternoons. I can do that. That's success to me. But your life and the different phases of your life and the different phases of your business, your definition of success is going to shift and grow. So once you define it, I just defined it for you as I feel it today, but I don't have that written down anywhere. I don't go back to that.
Right.
It could be totally different 6 months from now, because something happens in your life and you have to. And now we're back to this idea of bounce back ability and shifting and being agile and being flexible, of saying, hey, like, my center is moved. And instead of trying to force it back to where it used to be, saying I can adjust to this new reality. Now things are different. You have kids, right?
I do.
Right? Did your definition of success shift when you had children?
It shifts. It sometimes can shift hourly based on the kind of weekend that we're having.
Right?
Yes. And it's so true. Even as you're talking here, like, a couple things that I committed to myself this year was, instead of New Year's resolutions and all this kind of thing, I just said 2 things this year, Steve. Be silly and be still. That was it. Those 2 things. Because if you can be silly consistently, then chances are the people that will appreciate that the most are the ones that mean the most to you. And the same goes for being still. Like, if I'm still consistently and I'm not running after things and chasing things and gone too much and things like that, then the people that matter most to me will probably appreciate that more than anybody.
So parts of your definition of success right now are living a life and working in a way that allows you to maintain access to silliness and stillness.
That's right.
It's beautiful.
Well, on that note, Cait, this has been such a pleasure. I was so excited for it, and it's completely delivered and more. I don't want anybody to leave this without knowing where they can access more of you. Tell us about your podcast as well. All the things. Give us the hit list of all the things that we need to know about Cait Donovan.
I'm just going to give 2 things so you don't have to think too hard.
Easy.
The first one is Fried the Burnout Podcast. You can find that anywhere that you find podcasts. It's all over the place. And that gives you a really good introduction to everything that we talk about. And it's been going on for almost 6 years. So there's lots of things to listen to. And the other place is caitdonovan.com. And Cait is C-A-I-T, just to make it complicated.
Well, most importantly, all that information will be in the show notes to make it as simple as possible for our listeners. But again, thank you for the time. Thank you for the generosity of insight. It's been wonderful. And I look forward to speaking to you again. I know it will be soon enough. So thank you again for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And my thanks again to Cait for joining us on the show today. I want to really hit home the part of the conversation around resilience, in that this is not something, folks, that we're supposed to be going at alone. That it is something where we are supposed to ask for help. We are supposed to rely on the resources of others. As you heard Cait allude to, is that this bounce back ability, the durability of such a skill set, is immediately improved when we start to lean on the resources of others. When you think about where you're at on your journey right now, even if things are going phenomenally well, identify an area, just one area that you know you have just refrained from asking for help for way too long, or that you came up with something new recently that you know will require help, but for whatever reason you've yet to go and do something about it. Go ahead, find that one person right now in your world that you know can be that valuable resource, that resource that will immediately give you the opportunity to sustain a higher standard of what it is you're trying to do for longer, that will help you get to where it is you intend and are so committed to trying to get to. That is what resilience is, folks. That immediate and consistent effort in all aspects of what we're doing, but leaning on people in order to show up and keep doing it repeatedly and doing it well. Can you find that ability today to press pause and to ask for the help? I know I myself am going to immediately implement this as I wrap up my week. As we are recording this, it's a Friday, and before I even put my week in history and I lock up my office for the week, I am going to do some form of step in this direction by asking for help. So if I'm doing it and Cait's clearly doing it, I'd love for you to take that step as well. Thank you again for taking the time to join us on the show. If you're still listening at this point, I appreciate you lasting the duration of the episode. In the meantime, while you're here, take the time to leave us a review. How did this particular episode resonate with you, and why is it worthy of 5 stars? Because I don't see any other reason for you giving us a rating less than 5 stars. So why is it worth 5 stars? Go ahead and share that in the reviews. Share this with someone that you know it can be of impact to. And as always, best of luck with anything and everything you have going on in your world. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.